Conrad Fischer. I'm professor of medicine at Touro College of Medicine, New York City. I'm the program director of what is now the largest internship in the world, Brookdale Hospital Medical Center in Brooklyn. And I'm also head of our hospital's ethics committee, and I'm ordained as an interfaith minister too. But that won't be tested on USMLE or Complex.
Okay, good to know. So Medquest, let's talk about Medquest and how Medquest is helping students at the moment.
Well, after 16 years as the chairman of medicine for Kaplan Medical and being in the videos for Kaplan Medical in both physiology, pharmacology, and internal medicine, neurology, ophthalmology, I started Medquest several years ago when I wanted to be able to expand on the content of my Master the Boards series of books. So we think that students learn best when they have a variety of modalities. Some people will learn by watching class live. Some people will combine that and the question bank. And so what I did was I took my books, converted them one into videos, live classes, cramathons, and at the same time also expanded into question banks so people can assess what they've actually learned. The major thing is that I noticed after several years in live classes that students have a reproducible set of wrong answers. In other words, if you put somebody in a position where you say, hey, what is the most common cause of death with hemochromatosis? Or what's the most common presentation of pituitary lesions? And then you notice that people will say in hemochromatosis, oh, it's you die of cardiac, you die of restrictive cardiomyopathy because of infiltrative disease. And I go, that's so interesting. Gee, that's wrong. No, it's actually 80% liver. And in terms of pituitary tumors, people go, oh, visual disturbance, bitemporal hemianopsia, tunnel vision. It's like, no, that's actually 5%. Everybody has the same wrong answers. And so the most satisfying thing and what's different about this methodology is that it comes to a set of students knowing in advance that they're going to say a particular wrong answer on questions that are always there on the test. And the idea is to have it be so that they're wrong with me prior to being wrong on the real test. So how I noticed this was after I'd been at it about 2-3 years, this is now 25 years ago, because this is now more than 25 years of doing USMLE preparation, I get a message that says, Harvard needs a USMLE Step 2 class. And back then, of course, I was like, me, I'm a Harvard? You mean like Harvard, Kentucky? So I go up to Harvard, and I'm going through the statues with all the dead guys. And I go, oh, the classroom, is that the classroom I'm going at? No, not that one, not that. Is that the class? Oh, not that one, not that one. And they bring me to a windowless door that looks like a janitor's closet. That one? Yeah. And I realized what it was, is that at Harvard, they did not want to admit that anyone needed help. And so they hid me. I was like an intellectual 3 a.m. booty call. Nobody wanted to take me out, but they just wanted to have it behind the closed door. So, and I go, so you have problems with some board pass? They go, yeah, a handful of people, you know, they're busy being like academic. Oh, you mean like, I got it. And I'm like, they're so busy being academic, they weren't able to actually learn the medicine. I'm like, yeah, that's it. So I open the door and there's 75 students because they're very competitive and they don't want, one of them doesn't want to not have what somebody else has. So I start going into my usual quote routine about what's the most common presentation of pituitary tumors? And the Harvard students go, tunnel vision, bitemporal hemianopsia. Hey, what's the most common cause of death in hemochromatosis? And they go, heart, restrictive cardiomyopathy. That was when I realized that you can think that someone somewhere else is better than you, that somehow you're lesser. That is when I realized that we are one common humanity, because we are one common humanity that is equally wrong. That is why you only need 10 commandments. Don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't kill, don't, there's one other. I can't remember. But the point is there's a reproducible set of wrong answers. That's why our point is you don't need the tax code's 30,000 pages, but you only need 10 commandments, right? So the point about this is that the essence of my methods is that you take a history, physical, labs, history, physical, labs. We're going to be asked 5 or 6 basic questions. What's the most likely diagnosis? What's the best initial diagnostic test? Which physical finding is most likely to be found in this patient? What's the best initial therapy? What's the most common adverse effect of that therapy? So there's a reproducible set of questions on every disease a student needs to know. Number 2, and the most unique thing about what we're doing at Medquest is to find the wrong answers and get it wrong now where it can't hurt you. Be stupid when it can't hurt you. If you think that in order to achieve enlightenment, to build a soul in this lifetime, we each need to go through a certain number of mistakes, then the idea is to find out what those mistakes are, do them now, and say that each time you're wrong now early, you are making a more pure, clear, and translucent soul. And it is true both with the soul and for what we have to learn for medicine. Yeah, there's 2 things. Number 1 is uh, older students, or they've taken the test a bunch of times, or they didn't do well on step 1, and they feel discouraged about step 2. And we just had a lady who sent me an email that she had failed step 1 9 times. And she sent me a note saying that happiest day of her life is that she just finished her residency this week after having failed so many times. Because it's very despairing for people, very damaging to the sense of self. The other one I liked is people who met each other in a live class and got married. Another one that's great is when people walk in and they go into live class, they're the ones who are doing live and saying, Dr. Fischer, my mother had you in class. That one's very, very cute. And then the other one is that the people who, they just feel less lonely. Even whether you're in a live class or even when you're watching a video, people can feel that they have companionship, that they're communing, because then they don't feel so alone. Because humanity feels so alone, don't they? And so one of the things that we do is we realize that people are suffering in this way. So when Dr. Z says he remembers from 16 years ago, he doesn't remember the exact words, doesn't remember a particular fact. He remembers the emotions that went with those facts. Or he remembers saying, people are going to live and die based on how much you know. To remember that you don't have to pass step 1 and 2 more than once. Once you're done all the way. It's not like something that you have to redo. And to suffer more. Because to learn and study and really break your ass like this, because we're not here just to pass, we're here to kick ass, there is suffering involved with that. And so what people remember is this: 16% of the population suffers from major depression at some time in their life. And they're hurt, they're suffering. But that suffering in most people is not bringing them anywhere. The suffering that you undergo when you're studying and studying and studying and making sacrifices is more like the suffering of childbirth, where you're bringing into life a new being, and that new being is yourself. So suffer more, because when you're over with the process, you're going to be more useful, more knowledgeable, more intelligent, more beautiful, more helpful. And that is the fundamental, that is probably some variant of that. That's the best success story, is when people go from, this is a mean, harsh drudgery, to feeling the joy of their travel. And then, of course, many, 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 many thousands who've gotten into residency. I'm a very lucky guy because how many people get to know, one, what their calling is in this lifetime, to know that you're fulfilling carrying out your destiny with diligence. And number two, I'm very lucky because we get to learn more that's new, practice more that's new. You know, how many people have to be in the same job, but doing the same thing over and over again, year after year without change? So I feel lucky, and I think that that by osmosis seems to radiate out to people. Because if I didn't have to work for a living, I'd be doing what I'm doing right now. And the final thing to say in terms of strategy about us is that people should, read the book, watch the videos, read the book, watch the videos, and then use the question bank to be able to assess whether they learned it or not. How do you know that you learned something? Because the question bank assesses retention. I think the only thing I strongly disagree with is people skipping reading or other endeavors and just thinking, I'm going to just do a question bank over and over again. And I don't think that that's what the question banks of anybody's question banks are supposed to do. They're not supposed to be the primary learning tool. They're an assessment. Yeah, US clinical experience. Well, the good news is that if you have good USMLE scores, they will bypass a lot of the issue of US clinical experience. The other part of it is, I think every program director is perfectly familiar with the fact that because of COVID, the opportunities to go rotate in hospitals was markedly diminished or in fact entirely eliminated for 3 or 4 months. Third year US students got kicked out of the hospitals in March, and they don't have US clinical experience. They've been sitting on the ground for months. So I think that the program directors are just going to understand this. This is the same thing as about not having, if you can't take step 2 CS, well, then you can't be required for it for ECFMG certification. Although I do wish that the people at ECFMG would just outright say that so everybody can relax. I'm like saying, well, what's the difference between old furniture and an antique? This is old crappy furniture. No, it's a Louis XIV, it's a Louis XV desk and chair that should be put in a period room at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. What's the difference? And the answer is quality. They go to Istanbul and go, "Gah, don't you have any new churches and mosques around here? All you got is these old ones, man. Hagia Sophia, what have you done with it lately? Nothing." So the whole point is that what's the difference between an old crappy house and a museum piece? The answer is the quality of it. Now, there's two things. How do you assess the quality? Well, one, you're bringing up the issue about gaps in experience. If people have a legitimate reason for gaps in experience, that they were working a particular job, that they went and had a baby, that they went and they took a year to study for all their tests while they were getting their immigration status. It depends what the reason is for the gap. Now, if people just say, well, I was just sitting down doing nothing, yeah, that's different. And I also think that program directors understand that, particularly for the international graduate, that they have gaps because it needs time to come and move countries. For instance, one of our best interns is a guy who's 42 years old. He's an orthopedic surgeon back home. And, he had to work in a supermarket while he was supporting his family and passing his tests. He got good scores. And he goes, what I used to do, in the fruit section, those stacks of fruit, the apples and the oranges, to get them into a pyramid, that's really, really hard to do, to get those things into a pyramid. So I arranged all the geometry to get them in exactly the right shape. For some reason, we all found that to be very, very impressive. And what we basically said is gave him the contract, and that worked out. He's turned out to be one of the best guys we've had. And here's the thing about older graduates that some people don't realize. When you do finish, people don't know how long ago you graduated. When you finish residency, they think you've actually just been at it a long time. And they don't go, oh, you must be, brand new, fresh, graduate. They say, well, if you're 50, you must have been already finished your residency 20 years ago. And so do people fill in the gaps for you? Yeah, well, that one's really hard. The hard part is that USMLE attempts can't be hidden. They go on the USMLE transcript and people see them. And so you often get stuck. So that's one thing. The second thing is not to make excuses, not to say, well, I had life tragedies, because this always comes across as excuse making. Didn't do as well as I expected. I didn't do as well as I hoped for. I expected to do better, and I'm not sure why I didn't. Accept it and to own it. To own it, which means to say, yeah, this is a problem. Instead of, it looks like it was somebody else's fault. Yeah, you see, what people don't realize when they try to start by saying, well, you don't know the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows the sorrow. I mean, when you start out with that, what you're really saying to the program director, this is what they're hearing. You say, I had this really terrible life circumstance that distracted me from doing well. What the program director hears is this. Hi, I just want you to know that if I'm on call in the intensive care unit on Saturday night and anything stressful happens, I want you to know I won't be able to perform. Now, what you can do to compensate for that is if it was low on step one, when you pass step two, to pass with very high score. Because if you failed step one, and then when you pass step two, you pass by 1 point, it only reinforces it. And the same thing if you have problems on step 1 and 2 to try and knock it out of the ballpark on step 3. So to get something in the record to say, I was there once. I was there once. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yes, Dr. Fischer, I may have gotten divorced twice, but I did once have a 1-month affair with Brad Pitt. But it changes it because you say, well, things might have not worked out all the time, but she was there and she hit the heights at least one time. You can't do that, or all the steps are done for you. Then you have to go to alternate plans, such as finding the place that's going to let you volunteer or do research. This is the hardest thing because it's not reliable in the sense that they're going to take you at the end of the time. It's not reliable in the sense that it's going to work out at the end. But that's what you have to do. So one, if you failed something before, pass the next test big and it eradicates it, covers it over.
Covers it over.
Next, if you can't do that because you've already taken all the tests, then you're going to have to start looking for a place to volunteer or especially to do research. So I got some good news for this, is that ERAS literally has a red marker that looks like a stop sign when on people's transcripts when they have a problem on USMLE. So that, and they used to do this when people had failed, and they took it off. And the only time that there's a red flag or a stop sign, quote unquote, is when there's an irregular activity on the test, otherwise known as cheating. So the issue about red flags, again, you've got to own it. You've got to say, yes, I had this problem. So I would say that actually, I think this actually goes with Amazing Success Story also. With Amazing Success Story / red flags is trainees who had substance abuse problems and arrests in their background. And the guy put the record of the arrest on the top of his application so that we had to see it first. He said, look, I made big mistakes. There were errors in judgment. I've been punished for it. I accept what I did. I'm a better person right now. And so I would put that under Amazing Success Stories. And he graduated the program last year and is doing an addiction medicine fellowship now and be a specialist in addiction medicine. But he made it into an amazing success story because now he's going to help bring others to freedom. He's spent his time watching the shadows on the wall, and now once he's out of the cave, he's going to lead others out of the cave. In terms of IMGs, there are 57 schools in the Caribbean, but no one person could name all of them. I think a lot of program directors do choose mentally schools that they know well and trust year after year. And I think that there are some schools that have a very legitimate, reproducible curriculum and assessment structure that makes them have a lot of equivalence with US schools. And they take that seriously. And I think that some of these schools, that the faculty and the academic leadership are in fact people who were the leadership and faculty at US schools on the mainland. So if you go to them, as I was at AUC on the day that the quarantining was announced and everything shut down, I was at the front door when they announced that all the classes were going on virtually. But I met the leadership inside, and they were, you know, some very serious academic guys in the States, very interested in making a reproducible first-class curriculum. And I think you'll find the same at MUA, at Ross, at Windsor, at St. George's, of course, and there AUA. And so I think that there are a lot of very legitimate places with very reproducible good curriculum. Those are naming some of my favorites. So I think that in terms of the Caribbean, people have a greater sense of reproducibility, we should say, than there are countries where there are lots of medical schools, but you're not really sure, you wouldn't know them as well. You wouldn't know them. For instance, could I name the best medical school in Uzbekistan? Do I have residents from Uzbekistan? Yes. As a matter of fact, the intern of the year this year is from Uzbekistan. But I couldn't name the difference. And I'm very well informed. What about the people who are not so well informed? So I think that's the issue about the Caribbean. I think the other thing about the Caribbean is that the Caribbean does their third and fourth year in the United States. So there tends to be more familiarity with electronic medical records and US systems. So I think that that's the edge that the Caribbean student has against people from other countries. For instance, let's say I never met you before, and you send me an email and send me flowers and say, "Dear Conrad, I'd like to have a wonderful experience with you." Now, afterwards, thank you for that wonderful experience. That is different because it doesn't sound weird. It's like nice. So I think that it has the same effect as you would like what I'm saying. I say it like a joke, but it's kind of true. For those of you who know, shadi.com, marriage.com, these are the great internet dating, not dating, but marriage services. You don't know who the family is. Excuse me, you don't know who the applicant is, so you know the family. And so what happens with these is it's like arranged marriage where you meet once, maybe you meet twice, you know about what people like on paper, and then you have to agree to sort of hook up and stay together for years, if not the rest of your life. So I think that the applying for residency is very similar to an arranged marriage. Emailing and calling to get interviews, I don't think helps you. On a programmatic point of view, this is why a lot of programs, you can't call them directly. There's no live person to pick up the phone. It's also one of the reasons why am I talking to Match a Resident? You know, this is a spontaneous interaction. It's not an infomercial or paid political announcement. This is just hanging out with something that I think is a good. If people went and got the information they need from a service like Match a Resident, then there's less calls to the office. And I know why people call, but I just it's just overwhelming. So the thing about diversity is that the great news about medicine is that I wish the world worked like a hospital. We have people from every part of the world. They're most of the time measured on a level playing field, and they have a test like USMLE that's an objective measure. Now, some people get all fussy about the test and can say, well, is step one really testing something that's important? It should be pass fail. And the US students won that argument. But the USMLE was the standardized test of where everybody's equal. And you can complain about it if you don't do as well. But on the other hand, if you do well, it pretty much gives you the number of interviews you're going to get. And so the diversity, if you look around the hospital, you'll find a natural diversity without a push of social engineering or quotas, but rather 51% of US medical schools are women. We have a mix of people from all the continents. If you look at US doctors, 25% went to medical school outside the United States. I should say 25% were born outside the United States, went to med school from outside the United States. 25% were born in the United States, but went to medical school outside the United States. And of the other remaining ones is that a large part of them, the parents came from outside the United States. So growing up speaking a language other than English in the home is the norm in medicine. It's the norm. And that people are judged more often than in other aspects of life, more often than, the criminal justice system, for instance, and are judged, I think, more objectively and based on merit and skill. And the same way that we have a number of residents, 6, 8, 10 a year, that had major problems on USMLE or even failed USMLE, in some cases failed more than once. So I think that medicine is just the way it is now, with so many people who went to school outside or were born outside or have come from another culture automatically. I think that medicine, more than other places, celebrates its diversity.